Continuing, can you all hear in the back? Great. In the beginning, we walked through a little bit of a few pieces of this puzzle. We mentioned the 5 poisons. And I'd like to just add another piece in at this point, which are what we call the faults of samsara. The faults of samsara, along with what the other 3 things that normally go with it, the faults of samsara are actually not the one I want to cover this morning. The benefits of having a human existence, these are issues which are often troublesome for us. So I thought maybe to say a few words about these 4 would be helpful. The first one is that we are each endowed with a human existence, which on the surface of things seems rather obvious. It also seems, unfortunately, not particularly important. In the context of our practice, to find ourselves as a human being is extraordinarily important. And the reason we often don't think of it as important is we don't think that we play any role in it. That we either are or we are not, and not much to do about it one way or the other. Depending upon how you look at it, thinking about what you might do with that can become extraordinarily important. But it's not always easy for Westerners to grasp this value, again, because it seems like we didn't play any role in it. We don't know how it came about that we were born, except for the mechanical, physiological things that we know, but actually how did we end up here as a human being is not dealt with. We don't get a certificate about how that came about when we're born. In the context of our spiritual practice, we want to make use of every possible thing to leverage our ability to accomplish complete enlightenment in this very life. So the idea that we were born, the fact that we were born as a human being, provides us with certain opportunities that we would not have if we had been born some other form, ranging from a bacteria to a bird to a cow to whatever animal you want to substitute. All of those things we could say we could have been born as that. And again, I think we need to look at the fact that mostly we don't think there's any value to understanding that, because we cannot connect the dots from a previous life into this one. And so it feels to us like a sort of random event that happened. So the way that we can connect to the value there is by holding a certain viewpoint, not a belief. A belief here, in my personal opinion, is actually an enormous mistake. Rather, it is that we know that from somewhere, through some means, we came to be born a human being of in a certain way, in a certain country, in a certain gender, in a certain race, and all of these things, and all of the cultural issues that exist in those places. And we ascribe virtually no part of all of that to anything that we might have been engaged in previously. If we hold the view that our activities in this life produce results, sometimes good results, sometimes bad results, I think we would all say, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And we just expand that slightly to think not only is that true today or this week, this month, this year, this decade, could it in fact be true that it goes even beyond the boundaries of this life? But I think even more important is not even the view that it would go beyond the boundaries of this life, but that our sense of awe, if you will, that we actually don't know where it begins or ends. What we do have a sense of that is fairly easy to grasp is that all things, past and future, are connected. This is a fundamental Buddhist principle of unbounded interconnectedness. We can't find in our emotional and mental states, nor can science find an end to where the connections stop. So from that perspective, we might hold the view, what if, in fact, the things that I did a long time ago and what I do today and tomorrow bear their fruit? Certainly in this life, we can have a sense of, yeah, that seems to make sense. If we could extend that beyond the boundaries of this life and hold the view, how would I act? How would I relate to others if in fact what I said and did to others and to myself bore its fruit not just in that moment and next week and next year, but over boundaries, including my life after life after life? Then we can ask the question, just holding that view, not the belief in it, but just the view that it could be so, and if it was so, what would be the benefit of relating to it in a certain way? And at that point, we've come to the exact spot where, from the perspective of most Buddhist traditions, we want to get to have the view that our actions bear unbounded results into the future for ourselves and for all sentient beings. One of the benefits that personally I think is important is that if we hold that view, we then can also value things that we would not otherwise even imagine are valuable, such as the value of someone doing a lot of meditation alone somewhere, like in a cave, like the famous Milarepa did. The question of how does that benefit anybody is an interesting question. Maybe it benefits Milarepa, but how does it benefit me? But when we hold the view that our interconnectedness, our actions and the actions of others affect all beings all the time, then the drop of interconnectedness that comes from our life put into the ocean of interconnectedness bears fruit. So I'd like to have an open argument about it all, but we have other things to do. One of the most important pieces of shamatha is learning how to establish a still mind that remains connected to the object of its attention. Everyone who meditates comes up against the truth of the unlikely possibility that I would be able to maintain a stable awareness, mind resting on a particular object for as long as I wanted that to happen. Unlikely. If you've tried it, then you know that it's really unlikely. And it can be terribly discouraging in the meditation that we cannot keep our awareness still, we cannot focus, we are distracted, we're continually dealing with distractions. There is one grand method that one of the great practitioners in the tradition, the ninth Karmapa of a number of centuries ago, said the following things. Quote, "To begin with, you should try to sustain non-distraction only for the amount of time it takes to eat a mouthful of food." I love that line. I thought, whoa, maybe I can do this. Only the time that it takes to eat a mouthful of food, and that was not the end of it, or swallow a sip of tea. Now, he did not say that only beginners should do this. This was stuck into a fairly long section in a book by him on the subject generally of maintaining the meditation without distraction. So I also have the experience that more short sessions are more beneficial than smaller numbers of long ones. What we end up doing is having, if we go too long, we end up having a situation where we spent most of our time dealing with distraction. In other words, the entire meditation session is in some way not clear, not still, troubled. So if you allocate a short period of time, like a mouthful of food, it's not so hard to keep your awareness on the object. In that case, especially like you pay attention to your eating, by the time you swallow the food, you could just call that a session. Dedicate the merit. I didn't choke to death. That's good. And dedicate the merit of being alive, being a human being, and being able to practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. And the session is done. And you don't have to think to yourself, it was actually a flawed session. It was actually a good session. And then, in the time that you might do one long, continuously distracted session, you might do 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 shorter sessions that are almost all successful. Organically, if you follow that approach, you gradually take in larger mouthfuls and take longer to chew and swallow them. You just generally increase the length of the session, which can be helpful, as long as it is not just utterly distracted. So I was drawn to that, and I thought it might be nice this morning, maybe now, up until the lunch break, that we could begin by going for refuge again and see if you can give yourself the benefit of a number of shorter sessions where the ability to remain in a relaxed state and still have the mind stable and present can occur. So we'll begin with the recitation of refuge and bodhicitta.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go
for
refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness.
begin your practice by turning your mind to the idea that the important thing is to remain on the object, whatever it is. Your breath, for example. If you do a session of meditation with the breath, could be one breath. One breath. You place your awareness on the flow of your breath and you follow it out and in. Finished. Then you can relax. Relax for 2 or 3 breaths. And when you're ready, begin again. Place your awareness on the exhaling breath and follow that, and then come back in with your awareness clear. If you're going to be distracted between the breaths. Do not count them as distracted. A distraction is something that occurs that you did not plan on having, that you did not want, that happened to you, not something that you did to it. So, in this case then, the smaller portion of your time is dedicated to just following one breath, out and back in again. That small seed of regular success can grow into a significant ability to stay with the meditation.
this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
So we'll have another break before our lunch break here.